All right. Welcome back, folks. Week 2 of in-personness. So we are starting the last unit of the trimester today. Just a reminder, you have your second gel electrophoresis lab from last week that's due tonight, and you have a mastering biology assignment that's due tomorrow, okay? I'm not going to be giving you new assignments for the next day or two. We're going to be working on some things in class, but those are the couple things that you have to be working on at home. Any questions about that stuff that you thought of over the weekend or anything? Okay, the first gel electrophoresis lab should have been turned in already. I'm going to start grading those here soon. But you have another one and mastering biology. So 2 things to continue working on. As we start this last unit for the trimester, we're going to just do a quick introduction. I'm only going to be talking to you for a couple minutes. And I purposely didn't give you the notes for today yet because I don't want you to be looking ahead too much. I want you to think about what you already know about the cell cycle, which is where we're going to be starting this unit. I don't want you to spend a lot of time looking it up or looking ahead in the notes. You will get the note packet tomorrow. Those of you in class, people at home, you already have it. But again, don't look at it too much today or it'll wreck the activity that we're going to be doing today, which is intended to help you review what you already know about the cell cycle. Yes?
So like the quiz test that's on Wednesday, is that going to be on the stuff in the old unit or is that going to be on like old unit?
So that, and I think I actually put that on the last slide today, but, or maybe that's tomorrow. It will mostly be stuff from last week because we didn't have any assessment on biotechnology stuff. Mm-hmm. So it'll mostly be biotechnology. There might be a couple just basic like phases of the cell cycle, basically reviewing the stuff you should have learned in 10th grade. It won't be like super detailed stuff from today and tomorrow. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. So we're just going to do a real short intro. I'm going to show you the first 2 slides, but there shouldn't be a ton of stuff you have to write down. These slides will be printed in the printout that you get tomorrow, so don't feel like you have to copy all this stuff down. But this is just to give you kind of an overview of what this unit is going to be about and kind of where we're starting as we go through here. So we're starting by talking about the cell cycle, which is like the life cycle of cells and how they grow and divide to make new cells. And so we're going to talk about this, about a couple different types of cell division during this unit. When we talk about cell division, the most important thing that needs to be copied, of course, and divided nicely and neatly and evenly is the DNA in the cells, right? So the word genome you'll hear on and off throughout this unit. The genome just means all of the genetic information within a cell, okay? So it's the entire thing, your entire genetic code. The human genome is divided into 46 chromosomes. So your DNA is not just one big long continuous strand. You have 46 strands of DNA in each of your cells that are your chromosomes. Half of them came from your mom, half from your dad. So you have 2 sets of 23. And so we will talk about how these body cells divide, this process that's happening in all of us right now as our bodies grow and repair things. We'll talk about the process of mitosis and how these cells replicate and divide the DNA to make more body cells. And then later in the unit, we'll also talk about how cells divide to produce gametes, which are reproductive cells, like egg cells and sperm cells, because that's slightly different. Those cells only have half the genetic information, so that when they're passed on to the next generation and then kind of recombine, they're back to the full 46, okay? So this unit basically follows through the main processes in the human life cycle. So we're going to start this unit down at the bottom of this diagram where it talks about mitosis and development. Because like I said, most of us, as we are growing, are in that phase. Our cells are dividing and copying themselves to grow and to repair things. And then later in the unit, we'll kind of continue around this circle. We'll talk about first how this normal process of cell division is regulated and controlled, and kind of the signals that our cells receive that tell them when to divide. And so we'll talk about some of those control mechanisms and some of the genes that are involved in encoding for those. So we'll talk a little bit about how that's all controlled and regulated. Then probably like beginning of next week, we'll start talking about meiosis, that type of cell division that creates egg and sperm cells. And then the last part of this unit will actually be talking about when those cells come back together in those earliest stages of development, and kind of how those cells know to divide, and how the first little blob of cells knows how to create a head and a tail and back and front, and some of the cell signaling that happens in those earliest stages of development as we start moving back into that process of mitosis and cell division and development. So we're just going to kind of be going through this life cycle and talking about the different cellular processes that are happening at each stage. Okay, so that's kind of the overview of what we're going to be looking at in the next few weeks. We're starting with chapter 9, which talks about the cell cycle. But like I said, for the first part today, we're going to start by just reviewing what you already know. Okay, mitosis is a process you learned about in 10th grade. You hopefully remember a little bit about the basic process. And if you don't, when you start seeing pictures, hopefully it'll start coming back into your head. And so the first thing we're going to do is a review activity. And you have two options for how you do this. If you're at home, you only have one option. If you're in class, though, you're either going to do this as a cut and paste activity, or if you would like to do it online, there is a Jamboard. Hang on, I'm going to pull this up on the computer. That looks like this. This is linked under homework. There's a post just called Cell Cycle Activities, because there are two things we're going to be doing kind of today, tomorrow, and Wednesday as we start this unit to kind of review what you know and kind of build off of that a little bit. So this is the first one. You have these 8 pictures, and your task is going to be to kind of rearrange them and put them in order. If you're working off the Jamboard, the instructions are on slide 2. So you can skip over to that one to kind of read. And right now, we're just going to take a few minutes, and this hopefully will probably only take you 10 to 15 minutes. All we're going to do right now is try and put them in order. You can draw some arrows between them and talk through the process with some people around you. Before you go on to the second part, if you're cutting and pasting, maybe before you glue them down for sure, we will come back together in like 10 minutes so that you can double check and make sure you have them right. Then I'm going to have you start adding some labels and some vocabulary and starting to look things up in kind of the second part of this activity. Okay? Any questions about that? Okay. So people at home and anybody who wants to do this online, you can go into Google Classroom. Like I said, under homework, it's the only post that I put up this week. There are 2 things attached. Right now, you want to open the one that says mitosis review activity. And people who are going to cut and paste, I'm going to grab the supplies over here for you. So if you want to cut and paste, you can come over here. I have to grab the pictures off the.
Which one is the
Let's see what we got. Do you remember the order? I definitely.
This is definitely
Okay, for some reason the pictures aren't wanting to print, but what I want you guys to do right now, these are 2-page packets. You grab 2 pages and you can staple them together if you want. That has like the instructions, and then this is the next thing we're gonna do. And a blank piece that you can glue things onto. I'm gonna put the pictures themselves once more. I think it's better. I think that's right.
Try doing it like that, like do a line and then another line.
All right, are you guys ready to double check and then move on? Okay. So the main point of this is just to make sure you've got them in order before you glue things down. Like I said, you don't have to have 4 and 4, but make sure your pictures kind of go in this basic order. Okay, so take a look and double check. So we're going to talk more about the details of the cell cycle and this process and what's happening tomorrow. For the rest of today, I'm going to have you start adding in some labels and some vocabulary on this sheet or on your Jamboard. If you're working on the Jamboard, the instructions for this are on the second slide. If you're doing it on paper, the packet you picked up in the very top section, probably instructions number like 2 and 3 or 3 and 4, have a list of different vocab words. So first it asks you to go through and label the names of the phases. You intentionally have more pictures than there are phases, mainly to remind you that this is a continuous process. It doesn't hop immediately from prophase to metaphase to anaphase. There are in-between parts. So out of your 8 pictures, not every one of them will have a phase name as part of its label, and that's okay. Then you also have a bunch of vocabulary words to start looking up and adding to these pictures. These you will need to either look up in your textbook, look up online, or maybe I'll hand out the notes now that we've done that first review part so you can start looking ahead and start figuring out where some of those are. And those are some of the details we'll be talking through tomorrow. If you finish this whole activity today, the other thing that's attached on this same homework post in Classroom is called the Cell Regulation Packet. And those of you doing this on paper picked that up. That's the next thing I'm going to have you start working on. So the rest of class today is just going to be work time on these activities to start adding and learning some of the vocab and reviewing this process and then starting to think about how the cell cycle is controlled and regulated. If you don't finish both of these today, that's okay. We're going to continue working on them tomorrow and probably a little bit Wednesday after the assessment as well. Okay? So people at home, at this point, you can sign off and just continue working on these activities, add the phase names, add the vocab and stuff according to the instructions on slide 2. And then we'll continue working and talking about the cell cycle tomorrow. All right? So I will see you 3 tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day. Yes.
I think these 2, these 3. Wait, because this one's not supposed to be this, or like the
No, the actual textbook, which I'm going to grab a few and pull them out because I know a lot of people don't have them here.
So like, what do you I never cared. It's just like,
It's definitely not due though, right?
No, so this one, so this is the K, then it's this one, you can see the. You get to label. Okay, so I'm just gonna like go over this, I've got it right here, and you can start seeing the DNA in here.
Oh, maybe it's not supposed to send it in.
Okay, folks, as you're working, when you get to the vocab labeling part, if you don't have your book here, which I know most of you don't, and you want to borrow one just for this hour, I threw 10 of them out on the counter back there. This is chapter 9, but then you can look up some of that vocab. You can try looking it up on your phone too, just sometimes it's clearer if you actually look at a biotech book. So, as you start labeling phases and adding things in there, you can use that. Chapter 9. I don't know the page, but it's chapter 9. So.